Hello, it's Larry. I'm back. I'm going to give you 10 tips for testifying, whether you're a private investigator, loss prevention, cop, security guard, doesn't matter. These are great tips for testifying. What I'm going to cover here, tell you the trick that when I was a professor teaching students private investigations, every quarter I would play this trick on one of the female PI students. I'm going to tell you what that is. I'm going to tell you in this video the easiest way to look stupid when you're testifying and how to avoid it. I'm going to teach you two commonly mixed up phrases. If you say one when you mean the other, it's going to jam you up. And finally, I'm going to close out with a bonus tip and a little story that demonstrates the point. Let's get started right away. Number one, when you go to testify, look and act professional. Now, looking professional, obviously you know, wear the appropriate clothing, suits for men, dress suits for women, and act professionally. And I'm talking about from the time you're driving up to the courthouse to the time you leave. You never know who's around, who's seeing you in the passageways, who's hearing you, who's watching you. It could be someone on the jury. Tip number two, before you testify, try to get to the courtroom ahead of time and become familiar with it. When you walk in, a lot of times you won't be in the courtroom during a trial or a hearing. You'll be called in by the bailiff, and you're going to want to be able to walk right to where you need to go, sit down or stand wherever you need to be without a lot of direction. So if you can get into the courtroom ahead of time and know the layout, that's very helpful. Number three, when you're answering questions on the stand, look at the questioning attorney. Look at the guy who's asking you the questions. Don't look around. Certainly don't be looking at your attorney to try to bail you out. We'll come to that. Tip number four. This is the quickest way to look stupid, whether you're right, wrong, or know what you're doing or not. Don't nod or shake your head as an answer. The court stenographer is not going to be able to record that, and the attorneys are just going to ask you, or the judge is going to ask you to answer out loud. It's going to make you look foolish to the jury. If an attorney objects while you're being questioned, pause. Wait for the judge's ruling on the objection before you speak anymore or answer the question. Tip number six, this is a huge one. Do not take the bait. The attorney who's questioning you, cross-examining you really, is going to try to get your fur up. He's going to try every trick in the book, he or she, to try to antagonize you. If they say something that you feel your answer, they tricked you, or they tried to make you look bad, don't worry about it. Your attorney, the prosecuting attorney, the attorney on your side, whoever you're working for, if it needs fixed, that attorney will fix it. Also, going along with that, number seven, don't look at your attorney. We mentioned this earlier. Don't look at your attorney when you're answering questions. Look at the attorney that's asking you the questions. Answer directly to him. Tip number eight, admit it if you make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. There's nothing wrong with admitting it. If you don't, it'll damage your credibility. Now, along with this, let me explain to you, here's where the two phrases come in that people mix up. The phrase, I don't know, and the phrase, I don't remember. Distinctly different things when you're in a courtroom. Socially, you may use them casually, but the reality is if you don't know something, you don't know it. If you know it, but you don't remember, or you have to refresh yourself by looking at your notes, then the answer is, I don't remember. If you say you don't know, and then a little while later, you answer it because you remember, they're going to jump on that and say, well, you told us you didn't know, and now you know, and they're going to just pick away at that. Tip number nine, pause before you answer any question. Gives your attorney, the side you're working for, the chance to object to the question. And tip number 10, of course, always tell the truth. There is no reason, no excuse, no exception to that. If you're under oath, you got to tell the truth. There's no way around that. Now, here's the bonus tip. This will serve you so well. When you do answer a question, answer it as shortly as possible. And here's the trick that I used to play on female private investigator students when I would teach. I would turn to a female investigator in my class and I would ask, do you know what time it is? Inevitably, every time they would say the time. They would say, yeah, it's 10:48, or yeah, it's almost noon. That was not the question I asked. The question I asked is, do you know what time it is? The correct answer when you're testifying is simply yes or no. If the attorney wants to elicit out of you more, he or she will ask you, what time is it? Now, the reason I always chose a female student for this was because I had to pick someone who was together, who was top of the class, who had a good sense of humor, because this is the type of thing that might make a person look foolish. And every quarter, my top students, the most together people, were the female private investigator students. So that's why I would choose a female to pull this little trick on, to make a point about testifying and giving very short answers. Now here's a real life case that I worked. It was a theft case. I was going in to testify. Now the defense attorney was trying to make the case that I did not Mirandize the woman. Mirandize means to read her rights. Now as a private citizen, I am not under any obligation to do that, but this attorney was just bound and determined to try to make it look like I had skipped some important procedure and get his client off on a technicality. So the defense attorney asked me, "Do you know your constitutional rights?" Well, to be honest with you, you can go to law school and spend a semester or two studying constitutional law. I wasn't quite sure what he was going for. I had no idea where he was going with this line of questioning. I just kind of turned to the judge. This was a judge trial and not a jury trial. And I looked at the judge and answered, as well as any citizen, I suppose. There are all sorts of elements in constitutional law, including interstate commerce, and I didn't know where he was going with this. At the time, I did not know he was seeking to overturn this on the technicality that I didn't Mirandize her. The defense attorney, the next thing he asked me was, "Do you know what your Miranda rights are?" "Yes," I answered. He said, "What are they?" I said, "They're the rights that protect us from the government." Now, what I did not know at the time was that this was what he was trying to do. And what he wanted me to do was to read off the rights to show that I know what the rights are. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. But I was simply answering in the shortest sentences, having no idea that I was dismantling his case brick by brick. This went on for a little while longer, and finally I was dismissed. Again, the defense attorney's idea was that I did not Mirandize his client, but by answering in very short, accurate sentences, I demonstrated, not even knowing that that's what I was supposed to be demonstrating, I demonstrated that I was a private citizen. I was dismissed from the witness stand. I left the courtroom. About 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, the bailiff comes out. The trial is over. They didn't even go any further than that. The client was crying when I left, and just based on the strength of my testimony, she copped a plea. So the entire trial was done right there, just because I answered accurately and shortly, and it drove the prosecution's case right home, even though I didn't know that was the direction it was going. If you'd like to learn more things about being a private investigator, how to find people, missing persons, fugitives, whatnot, check out the Investigator's Ultimate Guide to Missing Persons and Fugitives at beapi.com. That's beapi.com.